I used to think that love, real love, was built in the quiet moments, the soft rhythm of a Sunday morning, the lazy tangle of feet under blankets, the way a name sounded when spoken through a smile. For years, that's what I had with Mara. Or, at least, that's what I thought I had. It was a Thursday when the first crack formed in the glass. A bright, ordinary Thursday in late spring. The kind of day that floats by unnoticed unless something shakes it from routine. I remember the weather vividly. The sky a pristine blue, soft sun filtering through the windows, warm enough for open jackets and iced coffees. Nothing felt out of place. Until the flowers arrived. I was in my office when it happened. My phone buzzed, and the text came from Mara. "Thank you for the flowers, babe. They're beautiful." I stared at the message, feeling like I'd misread it. I hadn't sent any flowers. I sat up straighter, the muscles in my back tightening. My first thought was that someone at her office must have made a mistake. Maybe the flowers were meant for someone else. I stared at her message for another beat, then typed back. "What flowers?" 3 dots blinked. Stopped. Blinked again. Haha. Very funny. The white lilies and orchids with the navy ribbon. You always know my favorites. And the card. She followed with a picture. A soft, tasteful bouquet in a square glass vase, the kind you'd see in an upscale florist's display. Arranged with care, elegant, not over the top. Exactly Mara's style. And beneath the stems, a card tucked into the corner. She sent a photo of that, too. For all the stolen moments. Yours always. There was no name. Just that. Yours always. My hands went cold. The office around me faded into the background. The hum of conversation, the tapping of keys, the usual bustle of Thursday deadlines. All of it fell away. I stared at that photo like it was a crime scene. I zoomed in, checking the card for clues, some hint of familiarity. I recognized the handwriting immediately, because it wasn't mine. Mara and I had been together for 7 years, married for 5. We met in the worn, gray halls of the architecture department in grad school. She was brilliant, the kind of mind that could sketch an entire skyline on a napkin and then explain the physics behind it. I was more grounded, more detail-oriented. She dreamed in lines and shadows. I kept the blueprints in order. We built our lives the way we built our projects, meticulously, deliberately, brick by emotional brick. So how the hell did I miss this? I didn't respond to her message right away. I just sat there, staring, the blood pulsing behind my eyes. I couldn't stop reading that note. For all the stolen moments. Stolen. As in secret. As in forbidden. I read it over and over, the words twisting into something sour. My stomach churned. It wasn't like I hadn't noticed small shifts in Mara over the past couple of months. She'd become harder to reach during the day, less responsive to texts. When she was home, she was warm, affectionate even, but distracted. Like she was half present. I chalked it up to a demanding project or stress at work. We both worked long hours. Late nights weren't unusual. It never occurred to me that someone else might be filling the quiet spaces I thought belonged to us. I clicked open our shared calendar. She had a meeting at the design firm until 6. I closed it again and leaned back in my chair, letting the ceiling blur above me. I couldn't breathe. Later that afternoon, I watched her arrive home through the front window. She parked as usual, walked up the front steps, tote bag on one shoulder, bouquet of flowers cradled in the crook of her arm. She paused to smell them before unlocking the door, that gentle, familiar smile brushing her lips. I had loved that smile. Had. Inside, I greeted her with practiced ease, my voice steady, smile measured. "Nice flowers," I said, nodding at the vase she placed on the kitchen counter. "Aren't they perfect?" She beamed. "You're not getting out of pretending they weren't from you, by the way." I chuckled lightly, careful not to overplay it. "You really think I'd go for white lilies and orchids?" "You know me too well," she said, brushing a kiss against my cheek. It lingered. Too long or not long enough. I couldn't tell. I held the card later that night, when she was upstairs bathing. She'd left it beside the vase, assuming I'd written it, and I wanted to burn it. But instead, I stared at the way the letters curled at the end, a little flare in the yours, a dramatic stroke in the always. This wasn't written for a friend. This wasn't innocent. And I hadn't written it. I placed the card back, exactly where she left it. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to the slow rhythm of her breathing, the subtle shifts of the sheets. I studied her profile in the soft light filtering through the curtains. Her features, So familiar. The dip of her nose, the curve of her mouth, were suddenly foreign. I wondered who else had memorized them. My chest tightened. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone from the office sent them, and she assumed they were from me. Maybe it was a client, some overly friendly thank you. But stolen moments? Yours always? No, this wasn't a mistake. This was an intrusion, a violation, a fracture that went deeper than I could see. I spent the next few days on high alert, watching, listening, noting every detail like I was preparing a case. She didn't seem nervous. No signs of guilt. No secretive phone calls. But she smiled more at her texts. And she never left her phone unattended. Something had changed. So I went back to the florist. It was a small boutique downtown. I remembered it from our anniversary last year. Elegant, expensive, the kind of place with handwritten receipts and a single bell above the door. The woman behind the counter greeted me kindly. "I'm looking for information," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My wife received a bouquet a few days ago. White lilies and orchids. Navy ribbon. I think it came from here." She gave a knowing smile. "Lovely choice. That arrangement went out Thursday morning. Do you happen to know who ordered it?" "I'm afraid I can't give out that information." I slid a $50 bill across the counter. She hesitated, then sighed. "It was ordered online. Paid in full. No name, just a note. It was requested for delivery to the Harper and Lynn offices on 5th Avenue. Mara's firm. Of course." My mouth was dry. Did they leave an email? A phone number? She checked her screen. Only an email address. Not one I recognize. Sorry. I left the shop with nothing more than confirmation. The flowers were real, the sender was anonymous, and Mara had accepted them without suspicion. I didn't sleep that night. Not truly. Because now I had a theory. And I hated that it fit. There had been a partner at Mara's firm, Noah Jensen. Recently promoted. Charming in that subtle, unthreatening way. The kind of guy who leaned just a little too close when he talked, who remembered the color of your dress or the scent of your perfume. He joined us for dinner once. Just once. And even then, something about the way he looked at her, it stayed with me. I remembered how Mara had laughed more than usual that night. How she'd been oddly quiet afterwards. It was a long shot. I wasn't certain. But I was going to find out. Because if someone was sending my wife flowers, if someone else knew her favorite blooms, the way I used to, then I needed to know everything. The first time I saw them together after the flowers, it was almost by accident. I hadn't planned to follow her. At least, that's what I told myself. But when she said she had a working lunch and left in a tailored navy dress I didn't recognize, new, clearly, and not mentioned, I felt the pull. Something primitive. I watched her from the upstairs window as she walked to her car. Her hair swept into a loose twist, a touch of lipstick she didn't wear for me anymore. She was radiant, and that made it worse. I waited 15 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys. I told myself I was running errands. That if she really was going to lunch, maybe I'd just happen to be in the same place. Maybe I'd see nothing. And maybe I'd stop lying to myself. Downtown was bustling by the time I reached her firm's block. I parked across from the main entrance, behind the tinted glass of my SUV, and waited. At 12:06 p.m., Mara stepped out, her expression unreadable, sunglasses shielding her face. He followed 7 seconds later. Noah Jensen. There was no mistaking him. Tall, sandy-haired, that easy confidence in his gait. He walked beside her like he belonged there. Not behind, not ahead. Equal. Familiar. They crossed the street together, not touching, not laughing, but something about the way they moved was synchronized. A rhythm that didn't belong to strangers. I trailed them at a distance, heart thudding. They walked 2 blocks to a quiet little restaurant tucked between a florist and a wine shop. One of those places with white tablecloths and a single candle at noon. Romantic by design. I parked, stayed in the car, and watched. She smiled at something he said before the hostess led them inside. It was a smile I used to know. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I could have gone in. Could have made a scene. But I didn't. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I waited until they came out. 1 hour and 16 minutes later. They emerged into the daylight, laughing now. Noah touched the small of her back lightly. Too lightly to be friendly. She didn't flinch. She didn't correct him. She smiled. They parted at the corner. She walked toward her office. He turned the opposite direction. But the damage was done. Something inside me shifted. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. This was real. And it burned. The next few days passed in a haze of obsessive clarity. I became a man I didn't recognize, quiet, calculating, meticulous. Every move I made was deliberate. Every word I spoke rehearsed. I set up a new email under an alias. Subscribed to data services I'd only read about in cybersecurity blogs. I found the florist's website and the order record. The email used to place the flower order was encrypted, disposable. But with some digging, I uncovered the IP log, enough to place the order's origin. Midtown, office tower, 3 blocks from Mara's firm. Noah Jensen's office. I'd never hacked anyone's device before. Never thought I'd cross that line. But now, I would cross it, burn it, and leave no path back. The next morning, Mara left her work phone on the kitchen counter. A rare mistake. She was in the shower. I opened the device and slid the SIM into a reader I'd ordered the day before. Within seconds, I had access. Calls, texts, contacts, photos. But what I found surprised me. There weren't any obvious messages from Noah. No saved photos. No contact name that stood out. She was too smart for that. But then I noticed a number with no name. Just a local number. Frequent. Daily. Late hours. The messages were deleted. But the frequency told its own story. I wrote it down. Later that day, I installed tracking software on her personal phone while she napped on the couch. It took less than 2 minutes. She never stirred. I hated myself for it. But I hated what she was hiding more. By the next evening, I had a pattern. Texts at midnight. Lunches on Thursdays. Meetings that ran late only when Noah stayed behind. On Friday, her phone's GPS lit up at an address I didn't recognize. An apartment. Not a hotel. Not an office. A residential building near the river. I called in a favor. A friend from college, Ben, now in real estate development. I gave him the address. 10 minutes later, he texted back, 1-bedroom loft. Rented last month. Tenant, N. Jensen. My heart stopped. It wasn't just flirtation. It wasn't harmless. They had a place. A place for stolen moments. The phrase from the card echoed in my head like a scream underwater. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mara breathe beside me. I wondered if she dreamed of him, of that apartment, of whispered names, of skin not mine. I imagined them together, her laugh in his ear, her hands where mine used to be. And it gutted me. But it also sparked something else. Resolve. If she was going to burn down our marriage, I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I wouldn't be the naive husband who cried into his whiskey while the world moved on. No, I would become the quiet storm behind her undoing. The following week, I watched them again. This time from across the street, parked outside Noah's apartment. At 6:41 p.m., she arrived. No hesitation. She entered with a key. Not a knock. Not a buzz. A key. She stayed for exactly 2 hours and 12 minutes. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Because I had the footage. A discreet camera installed across the street. Part of a work site I happened to know. I'd spent the weekend wiring it for remote access. Legal? Maybe not. But effective. The camera gave me everything. The entrance. The timestamp. The moment she kissed him in the hallway before they disappeared inside. I replayed it 7 times. Her hands on his chest. His on her waist. Lips locked like lovers in a movie. No guilt. No fear. Just desire. I saved the footage. Backed it up. 3 copies. 1 in the cloud, 2 on physical drives hidden in separate locations. Because when I confronted her, I would need more than words. I would need truth carved in stone. But not yet. Not until I had everything. Her lies. His arrogance. Their fall. Because the man she married was gone. And the man who replaced him? He was just getting started. The hardest part wasn't the waiting. It was pretending. Pretending I didn't know. Pretending her touch didn't feel like betrayal stitched into skin. Pretending that dinner conversations didn't echo with ghosts. That I couldn't smell his cologne on the blouse she wore last Tuesday. Because now I knew what to look for. And once you know, you can't unsee it. She grew bolder. That's what shocked me most. Not the lies, I expected those. Not even the secret apartment, or the kisses. But the audacity. The way she started humming in the mornings again. The bounce in her step as she poured coffee. Like being with him had revived her. Like I had been the weight holding her down. There were days I stared at her across the breakfast table, marveling at the mask she wore so effortlessly. One moment, she'd tell me about a design pitch. The next, she'd text him from the kitchen while I stood 10 feet away, sipping coffee. I began saving everything. Screenshots, call logs, audio clips from the recorder I'd placed under the driver's seat of her car. She never noticed. In one clip, her voice was hushed, breathless. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Being two people. You don't have to be, Noah's voice replied. Just be mine. I listened to that part twice. Then I transferred the file into a hidden folder labeled Inheritance, as if I were saving documents for a will. Maybe I was. But this wasn't going to end in quiet divorce papers slid across a lawyer's desk. No, I wasn't interested in shared custody, or half the house, or who got the antique dining table. I wanted her to remember. I wanted her to remember what it felt like to be destroyed. 2 weeks after the flowers arrived, I began phase 2. I booked a weekend trip. A surprise, I told her. Just the two of us. A lake house upstate. The one we'd always talked about renting but never found time for. Her eyes widened with gratitude. You're serious? Thought we could use the time, I said, smiling. The timing was perfect. Noah had an industry conference that weekend. I'd seen the invite on his synced Google Calendar. He'd be out of town, which meant she'd have no reason to say no. She hugged me, arms tight, lips brushing my neck. I miss us, she whispered. I nearly laughed. Instead, I kissed her forehead. The lake house was all dark wood and glass. A wall of windows looked out over still water and the trembling shadows of birch trees. Inside, a fireplace, a bar, plush rugs over creaking floors. I cooked dinner that first night. Her favorite, roasted sea bass, garlic potatoes, steamed asparagus with lemon. She poured wine, lit candles, played music softly through her phone. The illusion was perfect. And part of me, a very small, stupid part, wanted it to be real. We laughed that night. Real laughter. The kind that curled in your stomach and warmed your chest. She wore that gray sweater I always loved, her bare feet tucked beneath her on the couch. I feel like I've been sleepwalking, she said at one point. This, us. It feels like waking up. The words hit me like a slap. I excused myself and walked to the porch. Out there, the night was thick with mist. The lake lay like glass. A loon called in the distance, long and lonely. I closed my eyes and breathed. Not because I believed her, but because I needed to steady myself for what came next. The next morning, I said I wanted to go for a hike. She agreed. The trail looped through the woods and up a ridge that overlooked the lake. I packed our bags. Water, granola, a small GoPro clipped inside mine. Turned on, recording. The trail was quiet. Mara wore leggings and a windbreaker, her hair in a loose braid. She looked younger somehow. Lighter. We stopped at the overlook, sunlight breaking through clouds, water glittering below. She turned to me, smiling. Thank you for this. I didn't know how much I needed it. I smiled too. I know. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small jewelry box. Her breath caught. What are you? I opened it. Inside wasn't a ring. It was the note from the flowers. Folded perfectly. She froze. I watched her face shift. Confusion, realization, panic. Her lips parted, then closed. Mara, I said quietly. I didn't send those flowers. Silence. Her eyes darted from the note to my face. I thought you were, I mean. No. I held her gaze. You didn't think. Or maybe you did. But you didn't care. I don't. Don't lie. Not here. Not now. She swallowed hard. I was going to tell you. When? My voice was low. After your next trip to Noah's? Her face crumpled, just slightly. A falter. And there it was. Confirmation. I know everything, I said. The apartment. The lunches. The phone. The key. The stolen moments. She sat down slowly on the ridge's edge, burying her face in her hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, voice trembling, I didn't mean for this to happen. They never do. I was lonely. You were always working. You stopped seeing me. My laugh was sharp. No, Mara. I saw you. Every day. The problem is, I thought you were mine. I didn't want to lose us. You already did. She looked up, eyes shining. So what now? You want a divorce? No. She blinked. Not yet, I added. We're going to go back. You're going to act like everything is normal. You'll keep going to work. You'll smile at Noah. You'll answer his calls. And then what? She whispered. Then I'll decide. Her voice cracked. You're going to punish me? No, I said. I'm going to make sure you understand what it feels like to be erased. I stood, brushing dirt from my jeans. She didn't follow. I left her there on the ridge, staring at the water, the crumpled note in her lap. By the time she returned to the house, night had fallen. When we got back to the city, I began the final phase. I made a copy of the video footage, printed text logs, saved voice memos. Then I scheduled a courier. I sent them, anonymously, to Noah's fiancée. Yes, fiancé. He had a ring on his finger the first time I saw him. I thought it was just a fashion statement. It wasn't. I found her Instagram, her Facebook, her LinkedIn. I found the registry, white linens, a trip to Greece, monogrammed bath towels. I found the engagement photos, taken under cherry blossoms. Her name was Elise, and Elise was about to get a gift. Because while Mara had her stolen moments, so did Noah. And I wanted to return the favor. When the package was delivered to Elise's office, I watched from across the street. She opened it with a coworker nearby. Her smile faltered. Her mouth opened. She ran. I saw her call him, frantically, again and again. He didn't answer. And Mara? She received a text later that night from Noah. It's over. Nothing more. No explanation. Just those two words. She stared at it for a long time. Then she turned to me, tears rising. I walked past her without a word. Because this was just the beginning. There's a moment after destruction when everything goes still. It isn't peace. It's silence, the kind that hums in your ears, pressing against your ribs like a vacuum. That's what our home became after Noah's message. A quiet so heavy it bent the air. Mara barely spoke. She drifted through the rooms like a ghost, moving from one shore to another as if she could sweep away her guilt with each motion. Sometimes I caught her staring at the kitchen window, her reflection fractured by morning light. Sometimes she'd look at me, and I'd see a kind of terror behind her eyes. Not of me, but of what she'd done. In another life, I might have pitied her. But in this one, pity was a luxury I'd traded for purpose. 3 days after Noah's text, I started my final design, not of a building, but of an ending. An architect knows the power of structure. You don't demolish something without a blueprint for what replaces it. I wasn't going to explode my marriage in anger. I was going to dismantle it with precision. Mara still thought we might recover. She tried to make dinner one night. Pasta with garlic and basil, my favorite. But the moment she placed it on the table, the scent made me sick. I ate in silence, counting seconds. When she reached for my hand, I pulled away gently, almost kindly. Please, she whispered, just talk to me. I am talking, I said quietly, though I hadn't looked up once. She nodded as if she deserved the distance, which in a way, she did. That night, after she went to bed, I opened my laptop and logged into the joint account we'd shared for years. Every bill, every payment, every deposit, I knew them by heart. What she didn't know was that I'd been diverting my income into a separate account for weeks. By the end of the month, she'd have no access to it. Revenge, for me, wasn't about shouting. It was about control. About taking back the power she'd handed to someone else. I also knew Noah wouldn't stay silent forever. Men like him, confident, admired, they don't handle exposure well. It wasn't long before the cracks appeared. A message appeared in Mara's inbox one morning while she was in the shower. I saw the preview on her screen. From Noah Jensen. Subject, you ruined everything. I didn't open it, but the sight was enough. When she came downstairs, pale and trembling, I asked nothing. She offered nothing. She deleted the email immediately. By the following week, his name had been scrubbed from her firm's website. Word spread quietly, as it always does. Unprofessional behavior, ethical breach, client impropriety. The polite corporate phrases for disaster. Mara came home early that Friday. She set her keys on the counter, took off her heels, and said, barely above a whisper, "They let me go." I nodded once. "I'm sorry to hear that." She waited for more. Comfort, anger, something, but there was nothing left to give. When you watch a building collapse, you don't comfort the rubble. The next phase of my plan wasn't revenge alone. It was rebirth, mine. I moved my things into the guest room, quietly at first, then openly. No excuses, no explanations. She didn't argue. She slept fitfully those nights. I could hear her turn over again and again. One evening, around 2 a.m., she knocked softly on my door. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then opened it. She stood there in a robe, eyes swollen, hair tangled. She looked small, a version of herself I didn't recognize. "I know I can't fix this," she began, "but I still love you." "You love the way I made you feel," I said. "Not me. That's not true." isn't it? Because when someone else made you feel wanted, you forgot I existed. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't flinch. Why haven't you left me? She asked. If you hate me so much, why stay? Because walking away is easy, I said. Watching you fall apart is what I deserve to see. Her breath hitched, but she didn't argue. She just nodded once, as if she accepted her sentence, and walked back down the hall. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I nearly ignored it until I heard the voice. This is Elise, the fiancée, Noah's former fiancée. Her voice was calm, deliberate. I thought you might want to know what happened after your package. I'm listening. He tried to blame your wife, she said. Said she was obsessed, that she sent the flowers herself. Pathetic, really. He begged me to stay. And did you? No. But I made sure everyone at his new firm knew exactly who he was. He won't find work for a while. There was a pause. Then, you're not the only one who knows how to return favors. Before I could respond, she hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, stunned by the strange symmetry of it all. Two strangers, linked by betrayal, dismantling their offenders in perfect silence. That night, Mara cooked again. Another attempt at redemption. She asked if I'd like to eat together. I said no. The next morning, I came downstairs to find her sitting at the kitchen table, coffee gone cold, face blank. I can't live like this, she said softly. I know, I replied. Neither can I. She looked up, eyes searching mine for a trace of forgiveness that wasn't there. I'll move out tomorrow, she said. You won't need to. She frowned. What do you mean? I slid an envelope across the table. Divorce papers, already signed on my end. I filed 3 days ago. She blinked, lips trembling. You already decided. I decided the day the flowers arrived. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just nodded, staring at the papers like they were written in another language. Then she whispered, was any of it real? For me, yes. And that was the truth. The following week was a blur of logistics, attorneys, property division, endless paperwork. She stayed with her sister, who called once to beg for compassion. I said nothing. Compassion had left the building the moment those lilies touched her desk. By the time the ink dried on the final documents, spring had turned to summer. The city grew hot and restless, and I found myself drawn to the lake house again. I drove up one evening, the air heavy with humidity, and sat on the same porch where I'd once stood trying to breathe through rage. The water looked different now, not glassy, not reflective, just endless. I took out the last thing of hers I still had, that flower card. For all the stolen moments. Yours always. I held a lighter to its corner, watched the flames curl through the paper, the smoke rising into the twilight. The ashes fluttered into the lake like gray snow. For the first time in months, I felt weightless. 2 nights later, as I packed to leave the lake, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should check tomorrow's mail. Consider it closure. No name. But I recognized the rhythm. Elise. The next afternoon, a small parcel arrived at my office. Inside was a plain brown envelope. No letter, no return address. Just a photograph. Noah Jensen, disheveled, standing outside a courthouse. His expression hollow. On his hand, the faint line where a ring used to be. Scrawled across the bottom in blue ink were 4 words. For all the broken men. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of anger. Not even satisfaction. But recognition. Because somewhere between love and vengeance, I had become the thing I hated most. A man defined by what someone else took from him. And I wasn't done yet. 6 months later, I no longer lived in the same house, drove the same car, or even answered to the same version of my name. My colleagues still called me by it. Same email signature, same title on the office door, but I was someone else now. Someone leaner, sharper, quieter. My old life was a house I'd burned down from the inside and walked out of without turning back. But like smoke clinging to clothes, pieces of it still lingered. Mara's voice in a memory. The scent of basil on a late afternoon. The ghost of a question. Were we ever happy? Legally, it was over. Papers filed, property divided, accounts settled. The house went to her, not out of mercy, but because I didn't want it. Let her live with the echoes in every room. Let the hardwood floors remember every lie she whispered down the hallway. I bought a place on the edge of the city, an old industrial loft refitted with steel beams and floor-to-ceiling windows. Cold, modern, clean. No family pictures on the walls. No echoes. Just space. Unyielding, deliberate space. People said I seemed different. Colder. Focused. I told them I'd been through something. They nodded like they understood. But they didn't. They couldn't. Unless you've stood in front of the person you love most and watched their face twist when they realize you've outplayed them, you don't really know what betrayal tastes like. I knew. It was a Thursday when I saw her again. 6 months to the day since the flowers arrived. I had just finished presenting a design proposal to a new firm and was cutting through the lobby of their downtown building when I heard my name. The real one, spoken softly, like a memory wrapped in regret. I turned. Mara stood near the elevator, dressed in a conservative gray suit, her hair pulled back. She looked thinner, not frail, just carved down to the bone. Like the weight of guilt had worn her into someone new. She didn't smile. "Hi," she said. "Hello." A pause. "Didn't expect to see you here," she added. I could say the same. "I have an interview upstairs," she offered. "Junior architect role." I nodded. She hesitated. "They told me the position might report to you." "Oh, so that was it." "I'm only consulting," I said. "I won't be staying long." A flicker of something passed across her face. Relief, maybe. Or disappointment. "Can we talk?" she asked. I glanced at the time. Briefly. We stepped into a quiet corner near the building's cafe. She didn't sit. Neither did I. "I read your article," she said. "In the design journal. About grief in space. I wasn't writing about you. I know. But I knew it was me anyway." I said nothing. I wanted to apologize. Again. Not just for what I did, for who I became. I raised an eyebrow. And who was that? Someone who wanted to feel like they mattered. Someone who broke everything in the process. "That's convenient language." "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, voice soft. "I just thought maybe you'd want to know. I haven't seen him since." "Noah." "That's not my business anymore. I still think about us." I didn't respond. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "if we could have saved it?" I looked at her then, not with anger, not even sadness. Just clarity. "No," I said, "because I would have bled to save something you already buried." She blinked, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Mara never cried easily. That had always been my job. "I hope you're okay," she said quietly. "I'm better than I've ever been." She nodded. And with that, she turned and walked toward the elevators. I watched her disappear behind the closing doors, and the silence that followed felt like punctuation, not a pause, but a full stop. That night, I returned to the loft and poured a glass of bourbon. Not to forget, but to mark the end. I sat at the window, watching the city lights shimmer against the glass. Somewhere out there, Noah was rebuilding his life. Probably lying to someone new. Mara would find another job, maybe another man. People moved on. I didn't want revenge anymore. I'd had it. The satisfying kind. Not the loud, theatrical kind you see in movies. But the quiet, soul-level kind that tastes like closure. I had exposed the truth. I had watched them unravel. And then I'd walked away while they were still picking up pieces. But I'd also learned something else. If you let revenge define your recovery, you'll stay tethered to the very thing you escaped. And I didn't want to carry Mara or Noah into my next chapter. So I let them go. Not in mercy, not in grace, but in freedom. 2 months later, I received a card. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in bold strokes. Inside, a single sheet of paper. It read, "Thank you for not letting him get away with it. Elise." I smiled. Because some endings come quietly. And some arrive like gifts you never expected. Flowers on a desk, a name on a card. A final blow dressed as gratitude. This one, it was all of those things. And I had earned every petal of it.